Subscribe now our YouTube channel and press bell icon for get latest updates in our channel.
And gentlemen, good evening, our viewers from wherever you are across the globe or across the Caribbean, across wherever. Good afternoon and welcome to this special discussion this afternoon. This is a discussion where we will be looking at the whole question of the new immigration policies that has been announced, or adjustment to policies, which were recently announced by President Donald Trump. And we're trying to see how we can unpack how this will affect Caribbean nationals in particular, and of course the rippling effects which has to do with the reversal of this effect regarding remittances, capital and stuff like that, and how the shortfall there will be affecting Jamaicans and Caribbean nationals across the Caribbean, as well as the impact of the immigration policy, what it will have on nationals of the Caribbean here in the United States, in particular South Florida. You will looking at naturalized Jamaicans, naturalized Americans, naturalized Barbadians. We look at people who are, green card holders, people who are not green card holders, people who are just hiding in the corners, in the crevices, people who are already residents, people who are citizens, because there seems to be a multiply effect and a multiplicity of effect as it relates to what will happen with this new policy. We're going to try to see if we can unpack that this evening. This afternoon here, to help me to digest and to unpack that, we have a very distinguished panel of litigators, immigration officers, and political representatives here from various aspects of the Caribbean community. To my extreme left is our distinguished son, who's attached to Barbados by lineage. We have about attorney at law, Hickson. Attorney Hickson is an immigration lawyer, and he represents individuals who seek immigration assistance with marriage-based residency, family-based residency, citizenship, humanitarian relief, waiver, and of course removal defense attorney, waiver and other issues. And removal issues, of course. Attorney Hickson understands immigration law and is unique and and the unique needs of his clients allow him to provide top-notch immigration services by focusing the practice on immigration. Attorney Hickson is able to deliver the thoughtful, personalized, and effective services you will need to achieve your immigration goals. The law firm advocates for individuals before U.S. governmental agencies such as U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, Customs and Border Protection, CBP, Immigration Courts, EOIR, and Board of Immigration Appeal, BIA, and of course, the consular section of the U.S. embassies across the world. Mr. Hickson, good afternoon, Attorney Hickson, and thank you for joining us this afternoon, sir.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Miller.
Now, to my immediate right, I have a familiar face to the wider Caribbean community. Here, we have, let me see if I find my information, Paul. Paul, where did I put your information, Paul, so I can properly introduce you? Yes. All right. Paul Christian Numfrey, a political director and legal organizer with Family Action Network, a member and a chief instigator, organizer, agitator, representative of Asian nationals here in South Florida and across the United States. Paul, to my immediate right, thank you, Paul, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, I take it as a compliment.
And of course, down the end of the passage, a gentleman who understands not only law, but he also understands finance as well, in particular. Mr. Kenneth Lewis, and Ken is an attorney at law, and of course, and is also a corporate accountant, among other things. Ken, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Now, let me just see if I can dive into this discussion this afternoon. We hope that we'll be joined by quite a number of other citizens from the area in a minute, but until such time, We just want to remind our listeners there, we are not just broadcasting on Flexx TV or on Flexx FM radio. We are also on Christian Radio, WBIG station, and of course, Roadblock 101.1 FM HD3 radio. Now, the Trump administration aggressively is pushing the removal of non-citizens from the United States. Options to non-citizens have to prevent, and of course, the options to do non-citizens have to prevent their, let me repeat that. I'm getting a feedback, I'm sorry. All right. There's a situation where non-citizens are also being asked to, given the option of either voluntary removal or deportation. The Trump administration, therefore, is on a quest, it would appear, to really do what some people regard as a purge, but we don't know that yet. But it would appear that much. I'm going to start with Paul. You have been in the community for quite some time. You have been defending, agitating, participating in various levels of, the word is not persecution, but challenges, which quite a number of both Asian nationals and other nationals in the Caribbean have been facing, and they have come to your desk from this Family Action Network. Speaks to what kind of an impact is this new policy from the Trump administration, what that means to the wider community as you see it.
So what we are seeing right now is a complete change in the atmosphere in immigrant communities today. I would like, first of all, to say greetings to all of the viewers joining us through the different audio and video channels and online. It's a pleasure to be here. I believe that there is a very, very, very serious chilling effect going on in our communities where fear is being instilled for communities to continue to engage in their basic activities. And what are the basic activities of our communities? There are to work hard, to pay taxes, to take care of their families, to take care of loved ones in our countries of origin, and to, in doing so, provide really the basis of the thriving of our communities as we know them, whether it's putting food on people's tables, whether it's building the buildings that we occupy, whether it is taking care of people in emergency situations. And yet, these are the very community members who are under threat right now through a number of executive orders. And we've heard many of them going after, unfortunately, every tier of our communities, from people who do not have documented status to people who do have protections but who are seeing those protections taken away, and even to legal permanent residents and even citizens. So what we are seeing right now, which is hitting particularly hard, are many of the threats against both temporary protected status and against parole, which are basically, rather than doing what they were saying about going after so-called illegal immigrants, trying to make legal members of our community, having them lose their legal status. And we've seen that through many of the TPS rollbacks for Venezuela and then for Haiti, and also for the canceling of the 2-year Biden administration CHNV parole program for Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, where people were promised that they would be here for 2 years, and yet many of them haven't even been here for 1 year, and they are seeing that parole basically dissolve. And so what we're looking at are lawsuits to try to block many of these decisions from going into effect. And it's a very, very, very slippery slope because we don't know how these results are going to turn out. I would just say one more thing very quickly, that the asylum window for parole beneficiaries to apply for asylum as a basis for them to be protected ended on Monday night. And so they can still apply for asylum, but now it's a much more slippery slope in terms of, is that going to prevent them.
And by Monday night, you said this Monday, coming
No,
Monday?
3 days ago.
3 days ago.
It's already passed. Is this going to protect them from expedited removal? We have our doubts, and this is likely going to end up in the courts.
Wow. So you're saying that within the Action Network and across the country,
This is in all
large
50
amount of-
states.
all 50 states.
Yeah, yeah.
There is quite a number of legal suits that are taking place at this time.
Absolutely.
But does that stop the action of the instructions of the president?
So what we are seeing is that, and I think some of our other guests can speak to this in detail, but we're seeing many of the decisions by judges of different circuits enjoining the actions of this current administration, and that this current administration is moving forward with these actions even without the legal basis for doing so, given these injunctions.
Against that background, then, Mr. Ixon, Attorney Ixon, can you speak to the rippling effects of that, based on the fact that quite a number of citizens have thought that they have some kind of security of tenure, and then everything has now just turned AY?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'll give you an example. As the panelists just mentioned, there's something called temporary protected status, in which it is a type of protection from deportation for individuals that come from certain countries, whether the countries face some type of national or natural disaster or some type of civil strife. And based on this protection that is given from the United States government, people will be given the right not only to remain here in the United States, but also have the right to work, to receive workers' authorization, the right to also, they have a Social Security, and in fact, they would even be permitted to actually travel outside of the country and come back into the United States through a protection called right before our eyes is that this protection is being limited. Before it was extended until February of 2026, and normally they extend it and renew. However, in an unprecedented manner, it has been, I've never seen TPS be limited. It's always being extended, and there's always an implication, hey, this may be the last time that it will be extended, but it's never been shortened from the time it's been originally granted. So I'll give you an example. Haiti, it was supposed to go into effect and stay in effect until February of 2026. Now the Secretary of Homeland Security reduced or limited this protection to individuals that have TPS from Haiti, and now that is as of August of this year, 2025. And if you see, the ripple effect is, if you're looking sort of the writing on the wall, it kind of gives you a sense that, hey, if they're going to limit this type of protection, most likely or more likely than not, they're not going to most likely extend it. And if they're not going to extend it, then there are going to be a lot of individuals here that no longer have this protection, and now they're essentially, they're sheep, and they are now subject to, unfortunately, individuals such as ICE that can come and detain them and deport them. And these are people that have been here. TPS, for example, for Haiti in the Caribbean, has been in place since 2010. So this is not something in which you have people that, have been here for 2 years. Yes. They've been here for decades. They have had family, they have children that are born here in the United States, that are United States citizens. And now they're being told that this protection that normally they're given more than enough advance notice whether it's going to be extended or not, now is actually being limited, and there's a good chance that it will actually be eliminated, and now they will not have the right to remain here in the United States, and now they're subject to deportation.
But that kind of a breaking of families can, destroying families, giving a deceptive view as to what should have been as against what is. Is that just because of economic gain?
Well, before I answer the question, I need to dovetail on the things that Jamal and Paul just mentioned. So I think one of the things that we often overlook in this climate, we think about the fiscal consequences. But I think in our communities, we have to think about the psychological impact on our communities. It's been very severe in terms of how people feel each day and can they navigate their lives successfully on a day-to-day basis, going to school, going to work, etc. You have to think about the legal consequences of, can I be subject to removal? And of course, there is the economic consequence of, how do I support my family either here or in the Caribbean, right? So we have a multifaceted problem. With respect to TPS, Jamal is just right that we've never seen it shortened, but by the very nature of the conduct of this administration, it's been a very aggressive towards the people of Haiti and the people of Venezuela. So I think the writing is on the wall. What that does, however, is to further what I described as the psychological impact, because people are uncertain about their rights. Can I then just be in limbo if my TPS status is removed? And what do I do with my family members who are here lawfully or who were born here? But I will go even one step further to say that we ought to be concerned about the persons in the Caribbean community who have green cards, and even the persons who have citizenships. We're seeing people with green cards who are being held or detained for crimes that may have been committed 25 years ago. Yes. I mean, this morning you saw the news about the lady from Guatemala, yeah. Right? So we have instances in which people have gone about their lives, or they think that they have done their time, or they've had an adjudication for what they consider to be a simple crime, only to have the ramifications of those things rear their head at this particular time. So it is troubling for people, because having a green card is no get out of jail free card, so to speak, right? You can still be removed under the right circumstances or under the wrong circumstances, I should say. But I also just want to alert people that we have another movement under this administration, which is citizenship. So once you've been naturalized, you usually think of that as the end all and be all. I'm safe and I'm American. I can carry an American passport, etc. I'm free from removal. There have always been circumstances in which you could be removed if you're a naturalized citizen. For example, joining the Nazi Party, insurrection against the United States government, treason, etc. What is going on now, however, is a consistent effort to check the records of naturalized citizens to determine, did this person ever commit a felony in the past before being naturalized? Did this person misrepresent on an immigration application, etc.? Because that too would be a justification for changing your status. So what I'm trying to alert people to is, you need to be cognizant of what you've done and where you are, because TPS, green card, naturalization in this climate does not necessarily prevent one from being subject to removal or having your status change. And the final thing I'll add is, Jamal mentioned, or I think it was Paul who mentioned the courts. So we have a dual effect going. For example, this administration wanted to use the old Alien Insurrection Act as a basis for deporting.
That's almost an archaic kind of
And we see that the DC Circuit actually agreed that the injunction should stay in place. The issue is, very often, notwithstanding the injunction, you are removed. So then what is the recourse thereafter? You don't have the legs to fight, the resources to fight, you're outside of the country, etc. So unless the courts are indeed vigilant about the restraining order and precluding unjust removal, we'll see that millions of people will be in trouble.
Like what happened in the recent case where those 100 or 200 persons were sent out to another country, El Salvador. And it does report that quite a number of them were just innocent people in one sort or the other. Now, if this is taking place and accelerated at a pace where the court system will not be able to catch up with it, then one could interpret it as a purge. But we don't know. I don't know if that's ever too much of a strong word to use within the context of this, but it would give you that impression. But is this a good justification for making America great again? I don't want to get into a political discussion here, but I don't know if on this road.
Go ahead, Jamal.
Go ahead, Jamal.
Well, what I can say is that here in the United States, you know, the founding fathers have established that every person, not just a U.S. citizen, but every person has the right to due process. And what that essentially means is they have the right to be informed of any type of proceedings that are put against them, and they have the right to defend themselves in those proceedings. So something like expedited order of removal, in which essentially what that is doing is foreclosing an individual's right to seek any redress or to seek the, I would say, the decision of a judge, you know, having a judge step in and make a determination whether they should be removed or not. Something like expedited, you know, an order of removal now eliminates that person's right to due process. And that is something that, you know, as you mentioned, you could consider it a purge because it goes against the fabric of this country and having the right to be afforded due process.
But with that kind of a contradiction, I don't know, Paul, is that something that Congress can step in to do something about? Or is it something that would have to be negotiated with the president's office?
So when it comes to separation of powers, I think there are two basic considerations. First of all, what does the U.S. Constitution say about the separation of powers? But the second question is, what are these different branches of government actually doing right now? And what we're seeing, unfortunately, is that both houses of legislature at the federal level are basically rolling over. They are not standing up to even the actions that they are supposed to be taking in terms of the basic checks and balances that this democracy is based on. And that is why I'm saying right now that you have a government where the same party, and not even the same party, but the same branch of the party is basically dictating everything in the executive side with zero legislative pushback. And therefore, the last recourse is really the courts right now. And it's unfortunately that way. And I think you're seeing a number of decisions being made going in both directions with the courts. I think many courts are stepping in to basically push back on the most egregious examples of what the current executive is doing. I think there are also pieces of the judicial system that basically where the party in power already has a majority, such as on the Supreme Court. But I think you see that even with some of the Supreme Court judges, including Chief Justice Roberts, recently did flex his muscles and send a signal to the executive that they are engaged in overreach right now. Because once we are in a situation where the executive is defying court orders or does not feel compelled to respect the court orders, we are in an entirely different realm in terms of the basic democratic system of the United States.
Paul, Jamal, what are some of the things you see coming back at you at your practice in terms of the insecurity, the fear and trembling of various nationals who will come to your practice and say, listen, this is what my position is, this is what my status is. I mean, how can you help me to fix this?
All right, I'll give you a real life example that I'm facing right now. I'm reading reports that there is a deal in the making in which the IRS is agreeing or forming some type of partnership with ICE. And there are a lot of individuals that when they come into my office, I say, you know what? You may not have any relief available to you now, but if you are placed in removal proceedings, there's a relief called cancellation of removal, in which if you don't have status here in the United States, but you've been here for a substantial period of time, at least 10 years, then you could appeal to the immigration judge and say, hey, I've been here for the last 10 years. I've been here and I've been a person of good moral character. And by the way, I have a qualifying relative who would suffer exceptional unusual hardship if I am not permitted to remain here.
Hi, I'm Amy Flexx with Flexx TV, and I am here to tell you about our pay-per-view service we now offer. Pay-per-view streaming has helped many creators ranging from event promoters, sporting events, and concerts, from all industries to monetize their content.
You may be wondering why choose pay-per-view. Well, I am here to tell you for one. You are in control of how much you can charge your customer per click, if priced right. You can win big with pay-per-view. We also offer on-demand, which can be another way to profit from your event.
So, what are you waiting for? Call us at the number below or email us at flexfn@gmail.com and let us help you reach a broader audience globally.
Flexx TV would like to thank you for your continued support. It is greatly appreciated. Flexx TV, your #1 television station.
Attention business owners, are you ready to maximize your tax deductions and take full advantage of every credit available to you?
Look no further than BMG Tax and Accounting Services, your trusted partner in Tamarack, Florida. With over 35 years of expertise, Nigel Blair is here to handle all your business needs. From bookkeeping to tax preparation, we provide the personalized care and attention your business deserves.
Don't let opportunities slip away. Contact BMG Tax and Accounting Services today. Call 954-289-6005. That's 954-289-6005. BMG Tax and Accounting Services, experience you can trust, results you can count on.
Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world. Harriet Tubman is known for guiding enslaved people to freedom, the Underground Railroad.
States. And one of the major things that I tell individuals is, hey, I know you've been here, I know you don't have status, but if you are working and you're receiving money, it's best for you to file your income tax return. Because in those proceedings, although you have worked without authorization, it bodes well for you to show to the immigration judge that at least while you were here in the United States, you were doing something, you were contributing in terms of filing taxes. Now, with this proposed deal coming into place where IRS could potentially provide,
after you, because you're paying taxes.
yeah, and provide information to ICE, giving individuals their addresses. Now, a person may be reluctant to even come to me or to take at least my advice to even file taxes. And this is something to help, to help the U.S. economy in terms of reporting and filing taxes. So that is something that, I'm seeing right now where, to be honest with you, I don't know how to advise my clients, because what if they come to me and say, well, you know, I haven't been here for at least 10 years, so if I file my taxes now, is there a possibility that the IRS can provide this information to ICE and now ICE can come and pick me up? I don't know what to necessarily tell them, you know, and how to guide them, you know, in terms of, well, I think you should do it, but you now are at risk of having this. Now, once again, this is something that has been proposed. It hasn't been finalized, but this is something that I'm dealing with real time.
You have that kind of thing coming at you, Paul? Because you're in a community situation where you have quite a lot of persons you have to interface with.
We are in uncharted territory. We have never been in this situation before in terms of the level of fear and the level of, you know, how are we supposed to responsibly guide our community members in terms of making sure that they enjoy as much protection as possible, given these terrible assaults on due process. And you know, Attorney Hinkson mentioned some of the issues about the IRS and the ICE basically information sharing. I think that we are also seeing a lot of information sharing between law enforcement, local law enforcement, and
ICE?
ICE, absolutely, with the 287G agreements. This is, again, a very, very, very slippery slope, because if you think about police officers, what are they supposed to do? They are supposed to provide public safety at the local level. That is the scope of their job, and the scope of their job is not to basically be deputized as an ICE agent. First of all,
but they're not going out and arresting people and taking them to ICE.
So
almost, is that what's happening?
What we're seeing is that the 287G agreements, particularly the task force piece of the 287G agreement, basically creates a situation where police officers, even in a local jurisdiction, a county jurisdiction, in some cases in a municipal jurisdiction, are given training, and then through the training that they will have specific police officers who will be potentially asking questions of immigration status when they pull someone over. And second of all, very importantly, the information sharing of databases, so that when the police officer pulls them over, something in the immigration database may appear, you know, on basically the police officer's script, and then you have a situation where that gives the leverage or the leeway of the police officer to potentially go that route, if you will. And this is very dangerous. The most dangerous aspect of this is that you have a certain trust and a certain confidence between immigrant community members and their local law enforcement, which is crucial, for example, when local law enforcement is trying to solve a crime, and they have to rely on witnesses, they have to rely on what people saw. But if the first thing that's going through the mind of this
they're coming to arrest me.
Yeah, they're not going to stick their neck out. So this really is going to hit us in a number of ways.
How you respond to that?
In a couple ways. Firstly, you mentioned, is there a purge? The truth of the matter is that what you're seeing is consistent with the promises that the administration made to its base. Whether we wish to call it a purge or something else, it is not far removed from what the administration said it would do, okay? And the persons who would be targeted, okay? The persons who are being targeted are primarily not European persons, okay? We'll just put it that way. What I also want to add, however, is that there is a sharing of information between branches of law enforcement, and that impacts people significantly. But Paul, this has gone back to right after 9/11, that kind of sharing of information has increased and the partnerships have increased. And there is also the IHP agreement with ICE and local law enforcement. So if you are undocumented, if you have a problem with your status and you're pulled over for a traffic violation, that can result in immigration problems for you as well because of the shared information. Now, Jamal mentioned also trying to advise people, and one of my candid advice to people is to be sure that you understand your rights. And when I mean understand your rights, Understand what you need to do when you're stopped. Understand what you need to do if you are detained. Understand what the consequences if you are at a border. They're not all identical, okay? And your rights are not identical. But understanding how important it is to speak with counsel. Remember that if you speak with counsel, ICE agents cannot listen to the telephone call when you're speaking with counsel. But also remember that unlike being arrested in a criminal case, ICE does not have to provide you with counsel. So these are things that you need to understand. You need to understand how a bond hearing works. And then we talked about due process. It is always important to try and get before a judge. That's what the Constitution requires for due process, and immigration judges have great discretion and latitude in making decisions. So Mr. Hinkson talked about cancellation of removal. And generally it's 10 years if you're undocumented and 7 years if you've had a green card, right? So you can ask the judge to say, take a look at all the evidence that I've provided to cancel removal. Now, there are other things that you need to know. Asylum. You can withholding of removal, right? So you can, for withholding of removal, explain to the judge, I don't want to return because, and there's the corollary to that, which is the Torture Act, but if you were to deport me, I would be exposed to harm because of the social class that I belong to, race, religion, political affiliation, etc. You can ask for an adjustment of status, right? You can ask the judge to adjust your status.
So you're talking about asylum now?
Asylum is one recourse. There's cancellation, there's withholding, there's adjustment of status. One thing that's interesting and came to my mind was because Paul just mentioned working with law enforcement. And I think another thing that people don't understand is a U visa.
A U visa?
A U visa. By saying, hey, Your Honor, I was the victim of a serious crime. I have cooperated with law enforcement. I've assisted law enforcement in my community, etc. So understanding options at this particular time is critical for our community.
Jamal, he speaks quite a number of things which you had alluded to. Now, for somebody listening, and if you're just joining us, we're having a discussion here about immigration. To my left is attorney Jamal Hinkson. To my right is Paul Nemfrey from the Community Action Network. And to my extreme right is, of course, Ken Lewis, a lecturer in law, an attorney at law, and, of course, a corporate accountant. Gentlemen, the 1, 2, 3 citizens, we have a citizen now. People are listening to this, but, and they are confused. There's quite a lot of confusion, bats in the dark going around right now. What is the 1, 2, 3 that people should pay attention to in this kind of a unsettling situation?
Well, the first thing you need to establish is what is your current immigration status. That's the first thing.
And before you go, speak to a non-immigrant, a person who has no green card, and a person who has no citizenship, and they're here and they've been here for the last 10 or 15 years working, paying taxes, but they don't have any kind of status. That one first person.
So that type of person, the first thing you want to establish is, okay, you don't have any status, you don't have a green card, you don't have citizenship. How did you last enter the country? Did you enter the country legally? Because that plays a role. Because if you have U.S. citizen family members, you may be eligible to apply for what Mr. Ken mentioned, adjustment of status, in which as long as you can show that you lawfully entered the country, even though you may have overstayed your authorized stay, you may still be permitted to receive your green card through adjustment of status. So, the first thing is, if you're a non-citizen, let's determine how did you last enter the country? Was it lawfully or was it unlawfully? The second thing you would want to establish is, Now you determine how you enter the country. What are your ties here to the United States? Do you have familiar ties to the United States? There are individuals, for example, that, let's say, as we mentioned earlier, that they came here illegally. However, they are eligible to receive protected status, which is TPS. What I would normally tell individuals is, okay, now we know how you came into the country. Do you belong to any countries in which you're given some type of protected status? You know, for example, Haiti, if you're, or from Nicaragua, are you eligible to receive any kind of status just based on you being a national of those countries? And the third thing is that, you know, it's really important to at least just start the dialogue in terms of, hey, is there any way that we can formulate a strategy or a pathway to you achieving status here in the United States? So a lot of people think, hey, the only way I can get status here is through my family. And that is not necessarily the case. Ken mentioned that there's a U visa. If you're a victim of criminal activity here in the United States, there's something called an S visa, in which if you cooperated and you were a witness with law enforcement.
Okay.
There's something called a T visa, if you were trafficked here in the United States. Now, a lot of people think trafficking, oh, that means that someone induced me or forced me to come into the United States. And that's not necessarily the case. That's not what they consider trafficking. Trafficking is a forced labor, you know, whether it's forced sex labor or forced work. So a lot of times there are people that come into the United States legally on a visitor's visa, and they get themselves into a situation where now they almost feel that they're forced to work here in the United States based on the relationship that they have an employer. Sometimes people are even eligible for a T visa based on the relationship that they have with their family. Their family members are the ones that are exploiting them, and now they're eligible for a T visa. So, you know, it's important to start the dialogue to say, hey, how did you come into the country? What are your ties here to the country? And tell me your story. Because a lot of times, individuals, even listening to us right now, you're not going to remember everything that we say. But the most important thing is to get in front and to speak to an experienced individual, hopefully an immigration attorney, and tell your story. And it is our job to, you know, extract from what the individual is saying to see, hey, wait a minute, you said something here. I think we may have a pathway towards you obtaining your status.
But under this present dispensation, how possible is that for an individual to be able to do that now?
Well, the law is still the law. So, you know, a lot of people think, well, because this administration is come into power, that now we must leave. In fact, I had an individual that applied for adjustment of status and was denied. And normally when you get a denial letter, it says you have been denied and you must depart the United States within 33 days of this, or unless you're going to appeal the decision. And that individual took those words literally.
And start packing up, getting ready to
not
go.
start packing up, left. Didn't pack, left. And what happened, and what is, you know, unfortunate with this individual is that there is a law that says if you have been in the United States for a year or more, you know, whether it was illegally or you spent a year or more past your authorized stay, and you depart the United States, even if you have a family member that is willing to file for you right now, and you actually go to your immigrant visa interview at the consulate in your country, you are actually barred from re-entering for the next 10 years, just based on your departure, whether it's forced departure, where you're being deported, or it's your voluntary departure, as this gentleman just did. So he, you know, he was caught up in the hysteria of, I just got this denial decision, it's telling me to leave, I know what's going on in this administration, I'm leaving. And now, you know, hindsight is always 20/20. You know, he could have, you know, if he was placed in removal proceedings, we could have reviewed the denial decision, but now he's sort of limited his form of relief.
So he's likely not to be able to come back within the next 10
Well,
years?
Now, there are grounds in which you can ask for those 10 years to be waived, but it's almost like you have to jump through more hoops. And, you know, he did that because he was not well informed and he was caught up in the hysteria of what's going on. So, you know, before individuals make that leap, I would definitely recommend that, you know, you still seek the advice of a trained, you know, professional so that you know where you stand, because you may read something and it may seem, I have no shot whatsoever, but, you know.
But the burden of proof, therefore, will be on you to be able to.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're placed in removal proceedings, first the burden rests on the government to show that you are removable. So that's the first thing. But after that burden has been established, then the burden then shifts
From the government to you.
From the government to say that I am eligible for relief and I should be granted relief.
So therefore, you need the advice and service of a professional like yourself.
And representation.
And representation.
Well. Absolutely.
How many of such cases do you have in your community, Paul? Do you have a lot of such cases at this time or have been having?
So we are hearing stories about people who have made that decision, but I've been in many panels with legal scholars, and they're saying exactly the same thing that you know, Attorney Hinkson was saying. You know, not only about how people enter the country, did they enter the country with or without inspection, you know, and that, how that leads to differences in terms of the way that they're treated, but also the risks of so-called self-deporting without informing the authorities that this is what you're doing. That it's a strike against you. But we have heard of very, very few cases where this is actually happening, despite the fact that we are being bombarded on the radio waves, we're being bombarded on TV with these commercials from DHS, basically, you know, weaponizing really the threats of, well, if you don't self-deport, this and this and this is going to happen. Whereas, in fact, as was just mentioned, so-called self-deportation does carry very, very heavy risks.
Well, what kind of a multiplier effect do you know, Ken, will that have on your family? You're going to be deported, but you have a wife or a girlfriend or baby mother, and your son or your daughter in school or in college.
It's very difficult because, as I mentioned, we forget that there's the economic and there's the psychosocial effect of these cases. And I'll speak to two recent cases that I have. Somebody brought two matters to me that I chose to take these matters because I considered how important they were to the particular families and the community. The first one is of a Jamaican gentleman who had applied to be naturalized, received a letter about things that were in his past. And this is why I tell people that it's important to speak to counsel. What I did was to take the novel approach of, oh, and I must also tell you that they were, and still are, inviting people to come and be sworn in or get your green card, but you may not necessarily leave. I'll just tell people that too, because that is also happening. But what I did was to take the novel approach of filing a motion before, explaining his background and explaining why I thought he fell within the area for exceptions. And the representatives, including the attorneys for the US government, agreed. And so he was able to be naturalized. The other case I'll tell you about is a very novel one because it's a citizen, and she's Haitian. And at the time that she was brought to me, her son was 23, born here. Her daughter was 25, brought here. Now here's something I want to point out about how interesting this case is. Before she met with me, she had met with representatives of ICE and the government. She was even invited to meet one of the officers at the courthouse downtown, and she went and met with them, and they released her. And what's interesting is that when I called the officer, and I said to the officer, well, she's just retained counsel. I think this is a case I might want to take pro bono to help this family. Let me just tell you a little bit about this family so that you and I can work together. And he stopped me. And I'll tell you what he said. He said, Mr. Lewis, I'm willing to work with you, 100%. And if I had intended for her to be removed, she'd have been removed already. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to represent this person. And the reason I'm going to give you the opportunity to represent this person is because you're right. Everything you've said about her as a hardworking person with 2 American children is correct. She goes to work, she returns at 7:30. She goes to church, and when she leaves church, she goes to Denny's with her family. When she leaves her family, she goes home. What he was telling me is...
She has been monitored.
Indeed.
Wow.
So what he was telling me is, I know everything about her. There's nothing you can tell us that we don't know because she's already been monitored. One of the interesting things with this case that I was able to successfully explain to a judge is some of the records in Haiti were destroyed, etc. And these are things that you might want to consider in terms of, is she actually withholding information and evidence, or is she not able to obtain and present the evidence, which is why it's always important, as I said before, to try to get in front of a judge, but to understand your rights and know when to speak and when to remain silent. Particularly important.
But this is kind of a little bit difficult for quite a number of ordinary persons out there who will not have the understanding of these processes to be able to deal with and to deal with these challenges and how do they manage. So, but no, people don't have to do it. Find a lawyer, find their self-representation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, I hate to say it, but you know, a lot of the clients that I meet with, they come to me deflected and dejected, and they tell me that, you know, their interaction with the immigration officer when they were applying for a benefit, let's say naturalization, it was almost seen as like an adversarial type of encounter. And sometimes, I hate to say it, the officers, you know, take advantage of individuals that are not represented.
And their ignorance, of course.
And I'll give you an example. I represented a gentleman who was applying for citizenship. One of the requirements you have to show is that you're a person of good moral character. This individual had 10 children. And the reason why this is relevant is because when you say you have good moral character, one of the factors is showing that you have supported your dependents over the last 5 years. Okay. So he had 10 children. However, all of his children were adults. So what that essentially means is you have to show that you're a person of good moral character for the last 5 years preceding filing for citizenship. So in his case, his adult children, he wouldn't need to show that he supports his adult children or he supported his children in the past because the statutory period to show that has passed.
Okay.
So we went to the interview and the officer saw, you know, the list of all his children. And the officer said, okay, I see here you have 10 children, all right? What are the ages? He provided the ages of all his children. I'm there in the interview. I'm sitting next to him. And then the officer said, well, are all these children you have the same mother, all right? So that was a flag right there. And he said no. And then the officer said, well, how many different mothers do you have? And I said, you know what, officer? I'm going to interject here right now because this is not relevant to the examination for you to determine if he's a person of good moral character. And me and the officer then proceeded to have an exchange. And I said, if we need to, we can call the supervisor because my client has expressed that he has supported all his dependents. There's no evidence in his record showing that he has not or has failed to do so. So asking how many different children he has with different women is not relevant. The officer said, let me step out. The officer stepped back in and proceeded with the examination. I can only imagine if I was not there at that interview, what kind of questioning would continue and what he would actually be answering to, and then the documentation documentation that he would have to provide that he could never find, and he wouldn't become a citizen. So that's why, you know,
it seems like, man, do I have to pay someone to represent me even at the last stage? Yes, I especially if you have areas that are complex, and even if you don't think areas are complex. It's the funny thing, Mr. Miller. I would say that there are people that come to me, and when I look at their case, I even might say, wow, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You have a good case. I don't think there's any reason for you to be denied. And then there are people that come to my office that say, I'm going to do it myself. And I'm saying, it's the exact opposite. You need an attorney right now. So it's the mindset too as well. But at the end of the day, I always tell people, even if you're not going to use an immigration attorney, at least seek consultation, advice before you file for any type of relief. So at least you know where you stand, you know where all the, the mind.
Welcome to Flexx TV, where we inspire, empower, educate, and entertain.
Stay tuned for Flexx TV News.
Caribbean news, covering current events from around the world, regionally and locally, with